All right, thank you for that. All right, there we go. All right, so this is the Racial Equity and Policing Subcommittee on Policies and Practices. Today is May 27th. Let me pull up the agenda. Hello, Commissioner Hume, Commissioner Shiflett, Commissioner Andrew Weirden. Thank you for joining us today. Chief Brown, thank you for joining us today. And thank you to staff for being with us. Welcoming in Mark Cottrell from the city attorney's offices, and appreciate him joining us today as well. And I'll talk to you about that big thing around your neck after. Looks like you had
Hope you're all right, Mark. I hope you're all right.
I'm good. I'm good, Dave. Thanks, guys.
All right, we have two people that are at least who are experiencing pain on this phone call, maybe more. So thank you for being here. Let me share my screen and I'll pull up the agenda real quick and then we'll dive into it. A couple of you mentioned that you have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, and that's what we're shooting for. Okay, can you see the agenda? Well, you can probably see yourselves, right? Okay, now can you see the agenda? All right, perfect. So just wanted to briefly get some input on the public listening session if you'd like to. Larry and the rest of us will present more fully on that at the next commission meeting on Wednesday, but wanted to provide any space if you had any comment or feedback on that. I don't have a lot of data on that. I do have a summary of data that I can share, but not much. And then I'd really like to spend the bulk of the time, if we could, just shoring up and reviewing the recommendations so that we can present them in full to the full commission on Wednesday. How does that look? Good. Also, welcome Commissioner McDonald. Thanks for joining us today. Another item that we had and put on the back burner was the report that we touched on last week regarding Cottonwood Heights Police Department, and can touch on that topic and the procedures related to that if we'd like as well. But any other comments or questions about the agenda or anything to add to that? All right. Is there any interest from the subcommittee to see preliminary data from the listening session, or do you want to wait for the full report next commission meeting?
Do you have some of the polling data about the community's opinions about the recommendations?
Yeah, I do. Do you want to take?
I'd like to see that. And we failed to welcome Officer Groves. Welcome me.
Oh yes, thank you. There he is.
I'd also like to see it. Yeah, I'd kind of like to know how it went.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Steve. I did not see him come on, and there's Commissioner Johnson coming on as well. So, Steve, you want to welcome him when he's connected?
I would be delighted.
Well, warm welcome like we gave you.
Commissioner Johnson, welcome to the meeting. Want everyone to feel welcome, and I didn't receive that today, so I'm trying to model appropriate behavior. We're glad that you're here.
Thank you, sir. Sorry I'm running late.
All right, no worries. Okay, can you see the data there? Is that coming through? All right, thank you. All right, so again, here's some preliminary data. Zip codes of participation I asked, or we did, that these be mapped. Are you all familiar with, I'm sure staff is, but these zip codes? And
no, I was going to ask you if you had that information.
Yeah, like 84115 is where I'm at right now, actually. 84102, that's pretty much downtown, right?
101 is downtown, I know for sure.
okay. And where did you say 115 is?
South Salt Lake City area. That's where I'm at right now. This is Darlene. Hello.
Welcome again.
So yeah, it's where I am. That's my zip code.
All right, so for next week, we'll try and map this so we can have a snapshot of where these areas are. Anyone know where 84116 is more specifically?
Is that Glendale?
Well, I'm looking and it's not giving me exactly.
84116 is Rose Park in West Point.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so that covers our top 3 or 4 areas. Breakdown on race, ethnicity from the call from participants.
Is that in line with the population, the racial makeup of the demographic makeup of Utah, Salt Lake City?
It might be.
I'm not sure on the response, but Darlene or Commissioner McDonald, that's a good question that I can pass on that when we report to full commission, can have that next to it to show.
And
That'd
Darlene's fine, by the way.
be- Okay,
If I could,
thanks.
I'm not a demographer by any means, but I from like reports from like the Gardner Institute that I've seen, this is like sort of roughly similar to the like statewide demographics.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Kuhn. And again, that just reminds me to reiterate, this is very, very raw data that's still being processed, and I'm sure the report next Wednesday to full commission will be much better, more in depth, but your comments are welcome to help ensure that you get the data you want. You can see comparisons. All right, so what do you most want the Racial Equity and Policing Commission to help change? You guys lead out here. Congratulations that you felt that burden, I think, for the past 9-10 months. And so there you are. Did that surprise you, or did that feel about right?
I think it surprised me a little. I think I thought training would be above policy and, well, no, because you got policy and practice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's both. I
Yeah,
think it's a combined category, so I'm not surprised.
right, exactly.
It really felt the same way, Carol, and then went to where you went. Like policies and practices could probably cover both of, but kind of overarching, right? But this is how people responded. You can see it. And as Larry noted, as these were coming in, mental health came up quite a bit in the other responses. And so I thought your report on the recommendations was very responsive to that. What are your thoughts on the recommendations from the training subcommittee? You can see where these fell, which is, I think, good, but again, we'll break this down further probably into some of these themes that came through, but any comments or response to that? And I don't know what we do with that, but let's get ours.
So far, no surprises for me.
All right, thanks, Darlene. What are your thoughts on the recommendations from the Policies and Procedures Subcommittee and practices, I guess we'll throw in there? Any responses to that?
Does that score mean that they're listening? They're paying attention? I mean, because how do they know how well we're doing so far?
Based on the summary that was provided by the subcommittee, Commissioner Andrew Weirden and McDonald, and then you, Commissioner
Okay.
Shipman.
I don't see, I can't remember right now.
Yeah.
That's the pain talking.
Yeah, very limited information, right, that was presented. And so that great question, what's it based on? And then who's responding? But again, the raw data, that's what you can see.
I think too, and answering to your question, Carol, is the media maybe as well. What type of news people are getting from the media related to what's happening with the city. So they may base their answers on that as well.
Okay, which
Yeah.
That
means
would be
they
my
are
guess.
listening, right? That would mean that they're paying attention.
Yes, yeah, and people are paying attention. Trust me, they are paying attention. I get it all the time. So if there's something on the news, that will reflect in their answers.
Yes. I think this is positive. I mean, just my opinion, because you've got 45% about very good or good, 25% in the middle, and then about 26, 27% not great or concerning. If the work can continue, I'd expect the not sure or unsure to tip over if the work continues, and we can get up around 70, 80%. I mean, that's my optimistic view of it. Chief, what are your thoughts? Anything on this as it relates to policies, practices?
No, Josh, I think that's a good analysis. I mean, you're weighted towards the top. I think that reflects the work that you're doing, and just like Commissioner McDonald was saying, I think that shows that people are listening and paying attention.
And to that point, there's, I think, a little more uncertainty. This was kind of bizarre on school safety subcommittee. I think you had a group that understands and was responding to actions taken, and they get it, but then a group that is on the other extreme and not only unsure, but needs more information, needs to understand further, maybe a little more education, perhaps. There's more uncertainty, I think, in these responses compared to the training and policies and practices. That was my takeaway. Do you guys have any thoughts on this, or did this surprise you when you just saw this?
Well, this is Darlene. Let me know if I'm talking too much. What I find is if someone has a grievance about something, especially with the school safety one, I mean, there was a young lady that really had a grievance with that. They're going to jump on and speak to that particular issue. And it almost becomes maybe not so much a listening session as to the work we're doing as a listening session to, this is what I have a beef with. Why are there cops in the schools? And that's basically what that came down to. So that's what I get from a lot of this, especially the very first one we had. It was a total grievance section about this is how I feel. It don't have anything to do with what you guys are doing. I'm talking to the cops right now. I don't care about you people. But this one was more in line with what we were doing, so it felt more connected. But the ones that really went on had already, I want to talk about this. And this was one of those ones where they came in and they wanted to talk to this.
Great, I agree, great point. Then I don't have data on, again, who was voting, people on the team and commissioners and the staff were voting, but I think you're spot on, Darlene. Any other comments on this?
That particular woman was also from Texas, which I thought was very interesting. That I don't know if she's originally from Utah, but she said, I'm a teacher in Texas. So I don't know if a friend sent her that link and said, sign on and listen, but I thought it was very interesting. I see what you're saying, Darlene. She came in ready to dispute, but I also thought her comments were needed to be heard. That's just my personal opinion, because there may be people who don't realize some of the things I think she was talking about were the injustices or were the lack of counselors in school. So opposed to having law enforcement, but maybe that's not what this call was about. Like you said, it was a listening session, not a gripe session. So anyway, my 2 cents.
Yeah, that was interesting and a little confusing if, yeah, she'd grown up there and she was here now and experiencing it with children, the youth, or Yeah, good, good. All right, any other comments or questions on that? And that, again, we'll have a more in-depth report next week and have noted some of the recommendations or questions. Okay,
I thought briefly, Josh, is I think our work is important and measured and incremental. I think people were looking for more, I don't know what the word is, intense or extreme kind of responses that I don't think we're prepared to give. I know I'm not. And so there, some of those negative responses could have been a disappointment. They were expecting more powerful, whereas I think good policy change and incremental change is a great approach. Just my stab at it.
yeah, good. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. Okay, jumping into the recommendation. So this recommendation on the body worn cameras was passed earlier in the month. And then at our last meeting, we just circled back and with the subcommittee and myself and Suk Cimarron and Chaffin, who are excused today due to the holiday. But we did work on this and had a couple recommendations, or I guess edits, to take back to the commission that are noted here. One being that the qualified individual outside of the Salt Lake City Police Department should be designated by the mayor and the chief equity officer in a designated entity outside of the mayor's office. I believe the intent there was to provide a little impartiality and also to loop in the chief equity officer, which will be Coletta, as everybody knows now. The other tweak was this, publish the reports, the body worn camera audits and review audits we had annually. This, as I've talked to chief, can be, he's got to provide these annually, quarterly, biannually, I believe. And so I'm not quite sure where the subcommittee wants to land on the recommendation to keep it annually, move it to biannually, or quarterly. So maybe we could just shore that up quickly. This is where we landed last meeting. Does this look okay? And what is the subcommittee's preference on the timeline for reporting?
I'm good with it where it is. I mean, I can subscribe to that. Like the chief said, we'll be tweaking that piece and that component periodically anyway.
Yep.
So I'm good with it as is.
Thank you, Steve. And to your point, staff did comment that when the ordinance was passed, it was stated that the intention is that this will be updated and modified and will be a living document, so to speak. So, Chief, how do you feel about biannual reporting? Do you have preference? Is this sustainable and feasible?
Well, Josh, let's go back to the council. The council passed an ordinance for body camera review, and I think this is where this person would be designated to review. But I think there in ordinance, they talk about a quarterly report. And then as far as our CLIA accreditation, we do an annual report. So, and I'm not sure, I'm just trying to capture so we don't have to do more work than we have to. Maybe there's a way to, maybe we can talk about this on a quarterly basis as to where things are, any trends or things like that, and then just stick to what the ordinance says as far as updating the report outs, and then the annual report for CLIA, rather than do the CLIA report twice per year.
Okay.
I'm just trying to, and I don't know how you say that. I'm trying to figure out how we meet the requirements of the council ordinance, our CLIA accreditation.
Well, let me ask Mark real quick if he recall, and I don't recall, and maybe you can point us there, but the ordinance, does it state, Mark, quarterly, anything about quarterly reporting, or what is the threshold on publishing or providing the results of the audits and review audits?
So I'm looking that up right now. I could give you an answer here if you give me a moment, or you can patiently wait a couple minutes while I find it. It's probably better for me to find that answer and you guys come back to me and I can give you the
Okay,
answer.
let's do that. But if I hear you, what you're saying, Chief, to make this more sustainable, feasible, implementable, let's align it with the ordinance and what that reporting is and the CALIA requirement.
Right, Josh, and then I think Commissioner Johnson made some, we were talking last time, is I have no problem coming before the commission and talking about where, what we're seeing as far as the trends of our own internal audit, the trends of the city council audit, and then annually, we could always provide an annual update on the quarter. So there's a lot of room to review the information and just hold to the ordinance and the CLIA accreditation statute.
Okay, so it's oh, go ahead, Mark.
And so just to clarify what the ordinance requires, there essentially are two reports required by the ordinance. The first is a quarterly report to the mayor and city council, which would document those instances where an officer deactivated, muted, or had a body camera fail while being used. That information be provided on a quarterly basis to the mayor and city council. And then the other provision is this audit provision, which talks about a qualified individual outside of the department designated by the mayor shall randomly review at least 5 body-worn camera recordings at least once a month. And then that information or any findings of material non-compliance with state law, city code, police department policy will be referred to the chief of police, the city attorney, council chair, mayor, and mayor's chief of staff. So that doesn't necessarily contemplate an automatic reporting out of what that audit says, only if there is material non-compliance with policies.
Okay. And so I'm assuming that quarterly report to the mayor and city council would be in a public meeting, therefore published or shared.
Certainly I think that would be one way to do it. And I would imagine that's something that the council may be interested in. I would imagine at a minimum, it would be a transmission of a report in some kind of document form to both the mayor and the city council. And then that would be a public record is how I view that.
Okay, so we could modify this to be in line with that quarterly reporting requirement to the mayor and city council with the intention that that will be public and provided to the commission as well.
Mark, would you read that audit, or not the audit, the report piece? If I'm hearing it correctly, was that limited to not recording or muting or body camera failures, not necessarily, trying to think of the term you just used, but substantial behavior that's substantially out of policy?
Yes. So that last phrase you just used, I think, tied to the material non-compliance portion, dealt with the outside auditor looking at 5 body cameras per month, and that substantial non-compliance could also be a part of this quarterly report. But let me read that language to you, and then I'll put it in the chat so you guys can see it.
Yeah.
So the language says, the police department will keep a record of all instances in which a body-worn camera is deactivated, the sound is muted, or when an officer fails to activate a body-worn camera prior to a law enforcement encounter, including the name of the officer and the reason for deactivation, muting, or failing to activate. And such record will be provided to the mayor and city council on a quarterly basis. And so just to be clear, not all deactivations or muting of sound is necessarily a violation of state law or policy, but they have to at least put those reasons in there so you can make a determination of why that was the case.
And then that explanation, I assume, would go with the report.
Yeah,
to help the
it's
council
supposed to
mayor
be.
understand. So commissioners, as I understand this, the report about the appropriate use of the body camera and any inappropriate behavior that's captured on body camera different in the ordinance. So were we talking about capturing a reporting and sharing of any inappropriate behavior? And if so, back to you, Mark, is that checked through disciplinary action, or there are limitations on being able to share that? But I don't think the ordinance currently covers what I understood our commission or commissioner's desire.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Ange-Worden, I was copying pasting the relevant language into the chat, and I missed the first part of the question.
As I understand it, this commission, or the recommendation would be to share the results of the audit and any inappropriate behavior, in addition to the issues with the actual device itself. And so I want to clarify that with other commissioners to make sure that I understand that intent. And secondly, would there be, is the disciplinary action protected? Would we be able to share that?
And hey, Commissioner Ange-Worden, that's where I was talking about. That's why there are a lot of different audits going on. And that's why I committed last time to meet quarterly, and let's talk through under the council's audit. It depends on what you recommend. If you're talking 5 by the in language it talks now, they'll be reviewing 60 a year, but then they were talking about maybe 20, so that would be 120 a year. We could report back on that by statute what the reasons why it wasn't turned on or muted inappropriately. Then we can talk about our internal audit, where we look at 2 officers' videos per year. So you're going to have 1,140 videos that we'll also look at for compliance. That, Steve, will go back and look at if it's a habitual problem and if there was an internal complaint generated and maybe what came out of that. And then for our CLIA accreditation, we have to prepare an annual report on our body-worn camera compliance and things like that. So what I was saying is, rather than try to keep track of all these different things, just have the police chief work with this individual and come back on a quarterly report and advise them to these different audits and where they are and maybe some trends and findings and things like that. Does that make it easier?
That makes more sense to me, because I didn't understand the separation between the audit report and what I'll just refer to as an equipment report.
Yeah.
In the ordinance, not counting those other internal policy and CALIA audits that you just.
And that way we could have a meeting quarterly to talk about all these different things. You wouldn't have to worry about keeping track of them. A little more in depth. I mean, not like I need more work to do, but I like you guys. I do that for you.
I have a question. So Officer Groves, is it Sergeant? I don't want to demote him. He does the cameras, right? The body-worn cameras. Am I correct with that?
So are you thinking of Sergeant Givens?
Is it Givens? Okay. I think I am. My question is, are the recommendations that we are making here, when we're talking about when these are going to be reviewed and when we're going to provide a report and how many times and how much, is it feasible? I mean, will there be someone behind the scenes rolling their eyes at us saying, these people doesn't know what they're talking about?
Commissioner, no, I don't think so. I think that's why it's been 2 weeks, and I apologize, I missed the listening session, but I think there's a lot of moving parts to this, and there's several different ordinances and reviews that are going on. I think it would be helpful, because the person that comes in to do this job will become very familiar with them. We have a team that knows very much what's going on, and that's why I say if you commit me and this auditor to come back and review it with the commission, I think would be very helpful, because we can talk about at this level under this ordinance, this is what we found and this is what it might mean. On our CLIA accreditation, this is how we're doing, and here's an annual report that we will submit to you annually. And then on internal affairs, we can always look to see what we're doing and how many were out of policy, how many were referred to discipline, how many were purposely turned off, all those different things we can talk about. And then maybe visit about future recommendations or what else you may want to see. It just keeps it kind of a live rolling review.
And so does that answer your question?
It does. It does. I mean, because we bring this up a lot. This is not what we do, most of us, anyways. I mean, Steve has a little bit more experience on this than most of us do. So I don't want to make. I don't want to sound like, okay, we are recommending things that just is not possible or not practical.
Yeah, I hear you there, and I don't think you have. I think you've worked in lockstep with the police department and the city to understand the body worn camera ordinance and what is going on, and you've recited that here in the first two paragraphs. And then in addition to that, just some minor recommendations, and then this that we're talking about, we can consolidate that into what Chief just said regarding the three different columns and requirements, and capture that those will be reported back to the full commission and discussed quarterly. Is that?
Yeah, and Josh and commissioners, we can do it biannually if you'd like. We can still bring the same information back twice a year if you'd like, but we'll be looking at it every month and reporting back, making those reports to the mayor and the council on quarterly. But we can, I mean, if you would like, we can do it twice a year. We can do it on a trimester. We can do it quarterly, whatever you'd like.
Yeah, what would you get? Well, we can modify this to quarterly, biannually. I know we'll be taking a little hiatus and starting up, and maybe it reduces the frequency of meetings. Are you comfortable biannually looking at it? What does the subcommittee want to recommend?
I'm good with biannual personally. Darlene, did I cut you off?
No, you didn't cut me off. I was just gonna ask, what's the standard? Is the standard annually?
From what I'm hearing, the chief has three different standards: quarterly, biannually, and annually.
Okay.
Reporting. And so he's willing to do quarterly, or am I right, Chief?
Yeah, but we're gonna continue doing this work on a monthly basis, and then we'll have all this data. It's just how many times would you like to hear from me and this individual that's going to be doing these audits? We can
I'm sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Chief.
No, we can do it as many times as you'd like. If just know that it's not going to be just done twice. We'll keep Sergeant Givens will be doing his work. This new position, this person will be doing their work. It's just how many times would you like us to come before you and give you a review?
I personally think quarterly is better, because of the state of where we are in the country right now. People want you to be transparent, and twice a year may not be enough. That's just my personal vote.
I agree with Commissioner Shiflett. Let's look at that, and then if that's not working, like you said, we can tweak it and revisit it.
I also agree with that.
Okay, I hear a vote for quarterly, and I'll modify this and send it back out to the group, and we'll move forward with the recommendation. Again, it's already been passed, but we'll put it before the commission with.
Josh, just one thing though, when it says publish the results of the body worn camera audits, we won't have the annual report. I mean, do we want to say review with the commission the separate audits and the progress, something like that, rather than trying to publish the results every quarter?
Any thoughts on that from the subcommittee?
Can you say that one more time, please?
Because see, every year, Mason, Sergeant Givens has to put together an annual report, and it's in depth. It's a good report, and he's going to take all the information that he's gleaned over the year in reviewing those 1,140 audit videos. The language we had before would say publish a report quarterly. What we can do is we can review with the commission where we're at with the different audits and reviews, and not have to make Mason do that report quarterly because it may be, I don't know, maybe premature to do all that. But we everything we have, we can talk about. We can show you what we've reported it to the council on a quarterly.
Me, I just think we, and I think the none. I,
Do you think that the quarterly report to the commission would be adequate for information sharing purposes? It's in a public meeting, it'd be public, and then an annual report would meet that concern, or are you looking for more?
as a citizen, yes, I would want to see as much as possible when I can see it. As an African-American citizen, especially, I know I'll always have questions. So quarterly for me makes me comfortable, but I'd really like to hear what the other Commissioner Coombe and Johnson and McDonald, do you guys understand where I'm coming from? Do you feel the same way?
I understand where you're coming from, Carol, and I agree. I mean, Chief is saying, hey, he doesn't want Mason to do this report twice. It's a lot of work, whatever. But let's go with the quarterly. I vote for quarterly. Maybe we should put it to a vote. I vote for quarterly and see if we can get us a consensus on that. And if he can't handle the workload, or it doesn't work, or it seems to be where it's a hassle or something, then we can revisit it and modify at that time. But I agree with Carol. I'm with quarterly.
I like what you said about, if that's too much of an overload, then to me, then we need to bring somebody else in to help with that overload. Go ahead.
To add to
Well,
that, I think it might be worth exploring, seeing how we can provide more support. Well, I mean, maybe not we directly, but if there's more support in the writing of the reports, kind of like a lessening of the workload. I think it would be well worth it, because transparency, I think, goes hand in hand with frequency, and so the more often, I think, the more transparent, and then in turn, hopefully, like the more trust that can be built between community and police.
I I come from the school of CYA, and it seems to me that a quarterly report would definitely be more transparent. Yes, people are looking and watching, but more scrutiny, or would be more scrutinized if there was an incident, and that's when people will really start looking at things and saying why not this and why not that. And it seems to me a quarterly report would be more in line with, okay, this is what we are doing, whether you looked at it the last quarters or not. We have it right here. We have it.
Yeah, question of clarification for you, Chief. The
Yeah.
annual report published by Mason Givens, how does that differ from what you'll be reporting to the mayor and city council quarterly? Is
Well,
them verbally and the annual
Yeah.
more robust, and what?
Yeah, maybe we're saying the same thing. Let me just back up just a little bit. How about if we say something like this: to provide quarterly reports on the various audits to the council. So we'll give you quarterly reports on the city council ordinance. We'll give you quarterly reports on our internal audit, and we'll give you quarterly reports, if anything should transcend into the internal affairs world, to include the CALIA annual report, which summarizes, is the big report that summarizes everything over the year. And I probably didn't say that the right, but we'll give you everything that we have. Here's the first quarter, and here's the reports that we have. But knowing on an annual basis, we'll do that big report that we'll present to the commission, which will kind of summarize everything.
Wow, that sounds like it's meeting the interests of accountability, transparency to me on a quarterly basis, and then the required CLIA report, which we included in here, will be shared as well. Is that satisfactory to the subcommittee?
I like that.
Yes.
I make a motion, we go with that.
And we could even put something in there, if there's things that you want to see and hear. I mean, if you say that's good, chief, but we really like to see this, we can build this airplane as we're flying, so to speak. We can add things for you.
Great. I hear a vote to include that in the revision to put before the full commission from Commissioner Johnson. Do I have a second and an official yay or nay? All in favor?
I
Yeah.
second.
All right, Carol, was that a yay?
I said I second, but that was Darlene who said yay, so yay.
I just heard from you like unmute and mute. So, all right, good. Commissioner Cume, you good to move forward with that? And we'll modify it and send it back out to subcommittee before full commission.
Yes, that sounds good.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, chief. Thank you, Mark,
Thank you.
for looking that up. Okay, let's move on.
Question, how
Yeah.
would the, that first recommendation, how would that third party be designated?
Oh, good question. Referring this to this piece right here, Steve. Yeah, can you pose that question again and let's see if we can put some meat to that.
How would that person be identified and designated?
What are your recommendations? What do you, right now, we added by the mayor and chief equity officer. I believe it was prior. The ordinance just states that the mayor appoints, right? And we added the mayor and chief equity officer designate someone outside the mayor's office. Do you want to put more parameters or criteria on that?
Well, I didn't really understand who that person would be. I remember some of the discussion around it. Does anybody remember the discussion was about that? So.
The discussion was, it went for a while because the concerns that were raised is that we're not going to always have this mayor, and we may not always have a progressive mayor who is committed to the work that we're doing here. So having a position that's appointed by the mayor, it was, for me, I know I'm one of the people that's like, I don't know about that. But at the same time, I don't really know what's the best alternative. So I don't think we actually came to a definitive answer on that one. I don't think so. I could be wrong. Somebody can correct
right.
me. Okay.
Yeah. You captured that adequately, because the ordinance just provides that a qualified individual outside the PD will be designated by the mayor randomly to review. And then there was question, okay, well, what if the mayor turns over, that position goes away, or it's changed? So the concern was some checks and balances and longevity, right, Darlene?
That is correct. Yes.
And our discussion went to this point where we diversified it a bit by including not just the mayor, but chief equity officer. And then the discussion was, well, the chief equity officer is in the mayor's office. So might there be some more durability built in if someone outside the mayor's office was included in that? If we got as far as just stating a designated entity outside of the mayor's office.
Right. I think this is one we're just going to have to come back to or something, because there just isn't a great way of doing this one at this time, because even the chief equity officer is not, it's an appointed position, and I believe they serve at the pleasure of the mayor.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's just not something that we can say this is the way it's going to be always, and we may just have to be okay with that.
And yeah, exactly, Darlene. I think also too, we didn't want to get too narrow or broad because there is a disadvantage to just citizen Joe being appointed that doesn't know anything about the context, right? And coming in and being appointed. So there is purpose for the vagueness. Steve, what are your thoughts? Are you comfortable with this, or would you like to propose additional criteria or clarification?
I wanted to better understand the issue. To me, the council designating the mayor to select this person, I believe it's the highest standard you can have in the city. And I feel like it's I feel like that in and of itself is a significant act with the importance of this, where the mayor is directly accountable to the citizens for their choice. And believe that one of the recommendations from our commission previously was in favor of the chief equity officer because we wanted an equity lens to be put over these types of decisions. And I think that makes sense. But to me, it could start this whole string of what if the mayor is changed out and then they change the equity officer? Well, then they could just change the ordinance. So I'm trying to think where to find strength for the trust, because I'm hearing that there are potentially issues with trust, in the future, because there are elections, of course. I'm just trying to decide how we as a commission that's been established by this mayor and the council can add to strength of the position of the mayor and the council.
Okay, so are you saying that the highlighted portion, the designated entity, be removed because adding chief equity officer adds that equity lens? Or are you saying we redefine it to with support from the commission, or what are your thoughts? Do you have a suggestion?
Don't, but I do trying to understand this better. And I believe the root of this is ensuring that this auditor has legitimacy and can be viewed as a legitimate auditor from the lens of the community. And I believe that's what the commission's trying to do. I'm just not sure how we're going to identify who that designated entity outside the mayor's office is, because I would think that the mayor would select that person. So I don't know. Can somebody help me with this? Am I off base here?
Mark?
If I could add one thing, there may be problems from a separation of powers angle on this in requiring an executive a particular, to consult with somebody outside of the city before designating somebody. I mean, requiring that doesn't mean they couldn't do it. I mean, doesn't mean they couldn't voluntarily do it. I'd have to run that down. I'm not an expert on separation of powers. I just want to flag it as something I'd want to run by our attorneys who are kind of an expert on this, so that perhaps there's maybe it's not a hard and fast. You must consult with this outside entity, which may or may not exist in the future, which might require additional changes in ordinance. But it might also be impermissible to require an executive, the legislative branch, to require an executive to jump through certain hoops on something that's an administrative function, that's appointment of certain people. So let me just kind of run that down as well. And perhaps maybe, I don't know if you guys have any urgency in getting an answer on this today, but if you could table the discussion till the next meeting, I might be able to try to get more information on that.
Yeah, so I think the intent was a designated entity out within the city, but outside the mayor's office. Is that how you're understanding it, Mark? Or were you thinking the recommendation was a designated entity outside the city.
Sorry, as I was hearing and reading it, and perhaps I just misheard, I was thinking you guys were meaning outside the city completely on that. But regardless of whatever you recommend, I still think it might be helpful to run it through our people who are familiar with separation of powers issues to ensure that there is no that any recommendation wouldn't run afoul of that.
Okay, well, let me ask a question. Can we achieve our intent? And if that intent is that this appointment have an equity lens on it, is that satisfied by what we have there with that the appointment be designated by the mayor and chief equity officer, period? Or do you feel like you still want the checks and balances and to make this recommendation with this third party entity, and then the city has to figure that out on Mr. Cottrell's side? So do we want to make recommendation there with a period, or do you guys feel strongly want to move forward with this third party piece? I think that's the question before the subcommittee.
Can I refrain from making a decision on this one? I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm just gonna be flat out honest on that one. I don't know.
Kind of with Commissioner McDonald on this one.
Let's wait until we get the information back from Mark, I believe.
Okay, so what we could do, Mark, is if you could get that by a full commission meeting, we can bring this recommendation that's been approved, but these considerations to them with your information, and full commission can make a determination regarding the question that we're discussing now. Does that work?
Sorry, I was just typing the language in. Yes, I'll see if I can run that down
Okay,
quickly.
all right. Does that address what you brought up initially, Steve, regarding this modification?
Yeah, and it becomes a separation of powers issue because this is an ordinance and it'll be passed by the council giving direction to the mayor. Is that correct, Mark?
Yeah, the concern would be, of course, you have this the legislative body dictating in more detail sort of the mechanism of how an executive might appoint the people that they need to appoint.
Yeah, so to my commissioner colleagues, I'm trying to walk the line of hearing the importance of embedding trust, of embedding specificity into the recommendations to help ensure the outcomes that we want. And I totally respect that. And you guys understand it at a deeper level than I do, but I absolutely respect what you're saying. Trying to find the balance between that need and what we can do within the bounds of our governmental regulations, I guess. So anyway, I just want to be clear with all of you that I'm trying to learn and understand the depth of that concern and also have functional ordinances. That's why I bring it up.
Yeah, they're good questions. And so let's let Mr. Cottrell, Mark, do that research and get back to us. Just for your understanding, we do have full commission next week. And then the week after, another subcommittee meeting. And then the following week, I believe the 16th, we're looking for the final full commission. So Mark, if you could do that, give us some information. I think we at least want this equity lens piece on, and then we can determine the best way to proceed with this piece so it's sustainable and feasible and viable. That sound good? All right, good.
It does to me too. And everyone, thanks for indulging me in that. I think it's an important conversation, and that I have to step off the call.
You're gonna drop the mic on that, Steve? All right.
I feel bad. I don't mean to stir it up and then leave, but I think that's an important balance that we need to knowledge. And I just wanted to put it on the table and ask the question. Thank you all very much.
All right, thanks. Okay, I wanted one other modification. This training, community-based training on history of policing with people of color was supported at the full commission meeting. However, we didn't have a quorum to take a vote, and then we had some further discussion on it after Chief Brown did a little intel research on actually what it might look like. And so I'm recommend we present this training back to the full commission and then add on this regarding costs. The city staff recommended we add a piece like this to this because if we're looking at an accelerated timeline, which I'm not sure if that means 6 months, a year, 2 years, or what, but just wanted to run this language by you all to see if you wanted to add it to the recommendation and make it to the full commission. This just lays out again estimate of a little structure and costs, and then recommendation on funding for this training, development, and implementation and timeline. So just, if you're on your phone, can't read it, let me read it real quick and see if there are modifications, tweaks we want to make before we put it to the commission. And so again, addition to the recommendation on training on history of policing, I've added some language on a little structure costs. It states the commission and SLCPD estimate the following costs: 700 officers, 25 per group equals 28 sessions. So budget for 30 sessions. 2 hours each session equals 60 hours. Instructors are estimated to be $50 an hour, typically teaching in pairs, should equal 6,000 for the instructors, and 4,000 estimated to develop. Therefore, $10,000 to implement and train police department regarding this training. It is recommended that this training be developed and all officers complete the training within 1 year. Therefore, and Chief, you can give us some input on feasibility of timeline here, but therefore it is recommended that council funds this training development and implementation within this accelerated timeline and provide any necessary additional funding for voluntary overtime pay to ensure regular staffing needs can still be met while officers take time to attend the training within this timeline. And again, Chief, I'm looking at you on context because I don't know if a year falls under accelerated timeline or is reasonable or is implementable. So
Josh, when you say accelerated timeline, are you talking about having the training developed and getting it all done within a year?
yes. And I don't know that that's feasible. I don't know if 3 months is, 6 months is, 24 months. So the language on accelerated timeline just came from staff. And so I don't know what accelerated means.
I
Go ahead.
no, please go ahead,
Did
Commissioner.
anyone ask the trainers about that timeline?
Yeah, great point. Maybe we don't put a month timeline, but reasonable timeline for staff, trainers, city. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, because it may not take that long. I'm just wondering if anybody talked to them about it.
That's what I was going to say, Commissioner. Maybe we should talk to them to say, how long is it going to develop? Is it going to take to develop this? What kind of commitment can you give? Because it's going to take the commitment of these professionals to come in and help us do this.
Okay.
And I second or third or fourth that. It kind of goes along the lines of what I was asking previously, making sure that the things we say, that the subject matter experts can look at this and say, okay, this is feasible or not, or just say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. I'd rather be able to err on the side of caution in making sure that we can get things done because we're actually giving them something to work with that's feasible.
Great. Yeah.
Um,
So if we've got an idea of cost based on the highway patrol and what chief's dealt with and done regarding timeline, feasibility, implementation, I'm hearing that we don't put a time to it, just state reasonable, and that's reasonable to the city, police department, the trainers, right?
Correct.
Chief Dowd, do you believe, I mean, once we get the training 2 hours in an annual basis, you think that's feasible?
Um, with everything else, I'm not sure. Maybe 2 years.
Maybe you want to say, wow, well, yeah, that's a lot with everything else we're now being asked to do. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to drag my feet. I just don't want to, I want to meet expectations. So
Yeah, so you're saying, Chief, to cycle through 30 sessions might not be feasible to do on a rotating yearly basis. 2 years might be more feasible and even maybe manageable with the budget.
So is the commissioners good with a reasonable time? And then maybe we can report back on some of these things and tell you where we're at.
I think so, because I think you have to talk to the trainers first before you
Okay,
are solid. So I'm
okay.
comfortable with that.
All right. I like that then. If you give us that latitude, we want to make sure we have the right training and the right people and do it. We don't want to rush through anything. So,
Great. Other commissioners supportive of that to get the ball rolling and this in the works?
Yeah, I'm totally supportive of that.
I support that.
All right, excellent. Then finally, again, we spent time last time and modified this. This one's ready to go to full commission. And I didn't have any questions on that from last time. We just clarified with Jessica and tied this one up because of what's currently going on. So any other questions or comments on this recommendation or any of the others in preparation for full commission meeting next week? All right, great. Okay, we'll make those edits and I'll get them out to you guys. We have a holiday Monday. Mark, can we try and coordinate on Tuesday regarding that first recommendation? And Chief, I can run it by you and then get it to full commission on Tuesday. Or sorry, the subcommittee on Tuesday.
Sounds good, Josh.
Okay, great. Before we end, I just wanted to, I didn't want to put off Commissioner McDonald's question last week on the process for reviewing audits or report or conduct. And you brought that up related to the Cottonwood Heights Police Department's conduct during the 2020 protests. And although Mark Cottrell can't speak to specifics, Commissioner McDonald, did you want to bring that up? I wanted to see if you want the space to have that discussion or pose that here on the subcommittee today.
I don't want to keep people beyond the time. I can table it for now.
Is it something you want us to put on the agenda for full commission meeting or next subcommittee meeting?
Yes, I think it's something that at least should be brought up.
Okay.
Yes, yes. Yeah, because there were more than one person had asked me about this And so, and even as if this was something that as a commission, we are looking at or should look at.
Could you pose the question one more time, or the concern or thought, and then Mark can at least understand it better, and we'll prepare for a better discussion around it next commission meeting or subcommittee meeting?
Yes, well, well, most people are aware that Cottonwood Heights came out with the report a couple weeks ago that was audited by the Attorney General's office. And the question was asked, why isn't there an independent auditor that when use of force cases, well, in this case, it's going to be a use of force case, especially when there's a conflict of interest with the Attorney General's office, why isn't that automatically going to an outside independent auditor to conduct that investigation? It seemed that it was very biased and unfair. But how do you fight that if it's being done in-house per se? And the only thing that happened was the Attorney General recused himself, but it is still his office. So it just seemed that it's not going to get a fair, you're just not going to get a fair shake. So the activists in this case, myself being included, was just felt like it was just complete totally bogus. So and nothing could be done about it.
All right, thank you for restating that again. Mark, does that give you enough a question to, we can have a discussion and prepare for a conversation, or do you have a follow-up?
I mean, I certainly thank you for framing the issue. I don't think I'll ever be able to speak to sort of the motivations or what drove Cottonwood Heights or the Attorney General's office and the decisions they've made, but certainly uh, we could be happy to discuss any legal angles you may have about the use of outside entities conducting independent investigations when they're
Yes,
appropriate, et cetera. Certainly. Thank you, Commissioner McDonald.
absolutely, anytime.
Great. So again, Mark shared some examples with me that I think will be valuable to discuss further on the next call, and appreciate you, Darlene, for framing that one more time, and wanted to make sure you knew that we were creating space to have that discussion.
Yes, and I use appropriate language.
All right. Oh man, I'm gonna miss this subcommittee and commission work for the summertime. Thank you all. Any other comments or items that we weren't able to address that you wanted to bring forward before we end? All right. Thank you for the additional 12 minutes. Good timing. Appreciate it. Thank you all.